Hello guys, I hope you came back for another video of we're going to continue to read Red Dwarf Backwards, which is written by Rob Grant. He was the original co-creator of Red Dwarf. So here we are. I have got, guess you might recognise this book because Red Dwarf is such a smegging brilliant science fiction comedy. You know, Red Dwarf's my favourite. So, before I continue, I'd like to thank you for leaving comments on my first part of reading Red Dwarf Backwards. So, we're still in a section of Reverse the Universe. So, let's start reading through page 21. So, let's continue. There is clearly something about to be seriously amiss in the mall outside the souvenir shop. The shop itself was closed and shuttered now. As outside it, small bands of early morning sisters were all starting off in the same direction towards the car park entrance. Mostly, in an animated conversation, a couple of security guards were busily distributing liberally around the floor and upsetting bins, presumably in preparation for some fracas which was about to ensue. The cat, Kryten and Rimmer retreated around the corner to watch from a safe distance. As the seconds ticked by and the hubbub from a thronging tourists grew in volume until they were gibbering and gesticulating excitingly. Suddenly, the double glass doors burst open and Lester came in. He was facing forwards away from the doors, his feet out in the front of him, heels dragging the floor. He looked dazed, barely conscious. He was being propelled along by two uniformed policemen, facing the opposite direction, their arms linking his, and the phalanx of half a dozen of other police officers brought up the rear. The two policemen holding Lister stopped, twisting him over and laid him roughly on the floor. The rest of the men spread out and surrounded him. Lister started moaning and whiffing and clutching his crotch. One of the officers, who was sporting a inception black eye, went up to him. Suddenly, Lister screamed. Kryten's view was partially obscured by the officer's back, but from a movement of his shoulders and leg, it was fairly obvious that he was delivering a savage kick to Lister's groin area. The cat and Rimmer winced with a brutal sound of her impact. Lister seemed to recover instantly. He leaped to his feet operatively and nutted the bruncheon one of the policemen had swung at him. He danced towards the groin kicker and delivered a neat jab to his face. The officer staggered back, the bruising around his eye gone. Two policemen, the crunching swinger and a groin kicker, began circling Lister menacingly. The rest of them began to leave, taken off backwards at alarming speed, and a couple of them disappeared down corridors. Barking into walkie-talkies, the other four dashed out backwards through the car park doors and climbed into the van, which screeched off its siren blaring. Miss Lister maintained a boxing stance as are two remaining cops trying to outflank him. Words were exchanged, but Kryten was too far away to make it out what was being said. It sounded as if the policeman were trying to calm Lister down to which he was responding with taunts and abuse. Then, as blatantly as it began, it was over. The two policemen suddenly began panting and backed off slowly at first and menacingly, and then picked up the pace. First skidded past the bins the security guards had toppled, knocking them upright. The litter leaped back spectacularly into the baskets. Then the cops ran backwards down opposite corridors, with a crying kicker shouting into the collar microphone of his police radio, and they were gone. For the moment, Lister stood there, breathless, and they wheeled round, performed a reverse skid worth of Fred Astor, and charged off backwards in pursuit of a groin-kicking cop. Then, early morning, toys turned away, and went about their business, and Plaza was calm and peaceful, as if nothing at all had happened. "Well," Rimmer said, "that's our Lister, all right. Discreet, isn't he? The last 30-odd years seem to have miled him out completely." Kryten chewed a plastic off his upper lip. "The question is, how do we go about catching up with him?" "We don't, Rimmer," trilled without hesitating. "He's got entire cop SWAT team on his back." "We out of there, matey?" "No, think about it. There's only one policeman chasing him now, or rather, he's running after just one policeman. My guess is he's leading that policeman towards where we were going to be, in order to divert him away from us, as it were. Well, if that's going to be a case, our problem is getting to a place where the policeman would be going to spot us if Mr. Lister doesn't draw his attention. Does that make sense to you?" "Not even slightly." "I believe the corridor ran down least to us the walkway. We need to find a way out to get there." Kryten nodded. "Across the mole, if I'm correct. That door leads on to some kind of maintenance passage, by which we can achieve the same destination." Before Rimmer could protest, Kryten and Cat stared, reversing across the mile. Rimmer sighed heavily through his nose, turned around and backed out after them. The access door was unlocked. Rimmer and the cat slipped through it quite quickly. Then Kryten had backed inside, glanced around briefly to check that no one had spotted them, and closed the door behind them. The passage was damp and gloomy, but Rimmer found his eyes adjusted to a dark immediately. He looked around. The cat was beside him, but Kryten was hesitating around the door. Rimmer hissed, "Come on." "A moment, sir." Kryten scoured the floor. Yes," he said, and stooped to pick up the broken padlock. Rimmer hissed again. What are you doing? I thought it unlikely. This door would not be locked. Kryten snapped the padlock through the metal loop on the door and squeezed it. The snap edges of the padlock fused together. He said, and then turned to the passageway, and they had headed off past the sweating floor, walls, and pulsing generators towards the falls. Growling roar. As they got deeper into the passage, the falls rumble intensified to deafening proportions. Rimmer was horrified to discover he was finding it more and more difficult to see. After a few minutes, he was almost blind. What the smeg is happening? He screamed against the liquid vendor. John says, almost there, Kryten chirped. He grabbed a hold of the rails of a metal access ladder and climbed up to the hatch which led to the walkway. Gingerly, he prodded the hatch open of a crack and looked out. It was now just before 9 o'clock, and the walkway was deserted. As Kryten watched a policeman came running backwards towards him. As he swept past the hatch, Kryten recognized him as a groin kicker from a mole. Then Lister came into view, chasing the policeman backwards. The cop stopped at far end of the walkway, yelled into his lapel microphone, and stood for a moment looking at Lister. Lister skid to the stop by an access hatch and did a double take at the policeman, who performed his own double take and then disappeared around the bend. And for the first time, Lister directed his attention towards the hatch. His eyes locked with Kryten's, and he beamed a grin of such intensity. The Reckonoid thought his circus might melt in a glow of it. All right, he said backwards in his familiar Scudge twan. You can come out now. Kryten flopped open the hatch and clambered out. Oh, sir, Kryten groaned. I can't tell you how delightful it is. Save it. Lister cut in abruptly. There be plenty of time for earlier. That cop's still going to be chasing us for a while yet. Ikna, Tassie, Aswa, the cat grinned, climbing through a hatchway. Ye deb? Are ye? Lister turned to Kryten. What's he say? I believe he said, Hey buddy, how's it hanging? Kryten offered. Smeg, are you telling me he can't understand back talk? Great and outstanding. That's going to be a big help. I can translate for him, sir. Lister shook his head. Not good. We're going to be split up pretty soon. Rimmer's head appeared through the hatchway. Split up? We've only just found you. Lister grins broadened. Rimmer, I never thought I'd be able to say I'm glad to see you. He said, I am, and am still right. Rimmer battered away the insult with a look of a superior disdain. What's all this talk about splitting up? He climbed onto the walkway. I'll explain on the way. Lister glanced at his watch. We'd better get moving, he said, and broke into a brisk backwards trot in the direction the cop had gone. Kryten, Wimmer, and the cat looked at one another, performed a simultaneous thrug, and trotted backwards after him. Kryten upped his pace and drew level with Lister. Beg your pardon, sir, but you are absolutely convinced of a need for us to divide our resources. We've got no choice, Kryten, mate. It's me and the cat the feds are looking for. No one ever mentions spotting you or Wimmer. It's not a question of what we decide to do. Somewhere along the way, we get separated. Wimmer jogged up beside them. Excuse me, he panted. But can someone please explain the plan to me here? As far as I can make it out, we appear to be in a pursuit of an extremely brutal policeman with a penchant for drop-kicking people's donuts. Actually, Wimmer, he's chasing us. Well, call me a sucker and spin me on a stick, but wouldn't it be infinitely more prudent for us to take off in a opposite direction? Lister shook his head. That's not how things work here. I know it's hard to wrap your head around it, but things don't happen here. They unhappen because basically we've all already happened, and that's not a blind thing you can do to change them. It's like trying to change the past in the one universe. They ran on for some considerable time until the constant background rumble of the falls was just a distant roar. Suddenly, for no good reason anyone could see, Lister leaped over a roadside barrier onto a dangerously wet, narrow ridge of rock, which swept up to the narrow mountain track. As they jogged up to the track, they rounded a bend, and snaking track was clearly visible for a mile or so. The policeman was not on it. Lister stopped running and rested against a tree bark trunk, breathless. The cat, whose expression clearly portrayed the complete bewilderment at proceedings, caught up with them. Oh, hon, ho, ego, stay, ackley, f, toi. He warned, his buffered eyes darting from Lister to Kryten and back again. What did he say? Lister asked. Wimmer waved his hand. I think we could assume it doesn't compute significantly to the discussion. He guessed correctly. What I want to know is if we're right if the future, which is the past, has already happened, and we are nothing more than bits of flotsam swept along by time's stream. The big question is just what preciously. Is that's going to unhappen to us? Lister shook his head again. I'm not sure exactly. The people here, the natives of this universe, they have a sort of backwards memory. They only remember the future as soon as you get introduced to someone. They instantly forget you. I don't know why, but it doesn't work like that for me. Maybe it's because I don't really belong here. Lister paused and looked away across the valley to the distant peaks. Don't really belong here. There was no way of conveying the wretchedness, the fundamental loneliness those few small words contained. He'd spent a best part of a lifetime as a stranger in a very strange land. For most of that time, more than a quarter of a century, he had Chrissy at least to keep him company, but she'd been like the rest of him, remembering only the future. Somehow, his wife had belonged to his place, in a way he never could. You must have some idea where all this leading, Rimmer insisted. I mean, you're the one who's leading this merry jig. Lister sighed. All I know is we have to keep on following that cop until he stops chasing us. Rimmer scanned the deserted track before them, and where he is then. Only one place he can be. Lister leaned over the edge of the mountain. Sure enough, the policeman was gingerly picking his way down towards the valley below. Lister leaned back. He was become increasingly breathless. Well, now we know we are going. Other side. Rimmer squeaked. You can't be serious. He picked over. It's about a mile straight down. It's completely safe, Rimmer. Lister panted. We can't possibly get hurt. We're not actually coming down. We are actually coming up. And we have already arrived safely, see? Come on. And he turned to lower himself over the side. Rimmer folded his arms, not in the mount for Platinum Sundays. Sir, Kryten implored, we have to go after him. Believe me, I'd love to join this little expedition, only I suffer from a terrible mental affliction known as sanity. Lister glanced over his shoulder. Directly beneath them, a dirt road cut a thin grey trail across the rocky valley floor. There was a battered old pickup truck parked there, its doors akimbo. Behind that, the police car was screwed across the trail. He stepped on the mountain track. Maybe you're right. Maybe this is the way we should split up. Kryten, you and Rimmer carry on up the track. See you over there. He nodded across the valley. Where the valley road heads down from a mountain. Kryten nodded. I'll pick you up there. How quickly can you make it? Kryten tilted his head and made some swift calculations. Personally, in a double-time jug mode, I could make it in 22 minutes and 9 seconds. But Mr. Rimmer, carry him back carry him. Lister said, Beg your pardon, sir? Switched off his light bee and popped it in your pocket. Now, just a minute. Rimmer stepped forward. Lister's breathing was getting more labored, and now the cat was panting heavily to no time. Lister gasped to argue, just do it. Kryten flipped a switch mark standby on the remote pack, freezing Rimmer in mid-protest. His image wavered and flicked off, and his light bee plopped neatly into Kryten's outstretched palm. Kryten dropped a tiny Jimsai into the pocket of his conjoy. It's probably for the best. His batteries needed conserving. Lister nodded his voice, now little more than a whispering whisper. Found some sort of cover, some bushes, whatever, and hide till we get there. He swallowed and looked down the mountain. The policeman was about halfway up. I'll go first till Lister turned around, from his lips. Into a circle and sucked noisily. A great wave of sputum suddenly leaped off one of the rocks by his feet and shot neatly into his mouth. Tell the cat to wait until the police car's gone before he sets off. Understood. Lister back to the edge of the mountain again. His heart was thumping so madly in his chest. He felt like it was going to burst through his shirt and raced down the track, gibbering insanely. He wiped a thin skin of sweat from his forehead and held out his hand. Kryten hesitated for a second, then stepped up and grabbed it. He gently lowered Lister over the side. It was slower going than Lister had imagined, but his fingertips hurtless with every foot of progress, and his heart rate began to subside. After the first 50 yards or so, he spared a look down. The copse was alarmingly close. For a reason, he seemed to be gaining on Lister. How could that be happening? He looked back up again and tried to concentrate on the descent, but his heart started thumping again, and blood began to roar in his ears. He clambered down another few feet, but he was hurt by the inexplicable dizziness. He was hyperventilating again. He was afraid he was going to lose consciousness. There was a sturdy branch jutting out at about shoulder height, and he grabbed it. He dangled his right leg down, but he couldn't find a foothold. He scrambled around with a leg, trying to find some purchase, then slowly, experimentally, his left leg started skidding down the rock face. He tried to lift it back, but he wouldn't go. Suddenly, he was dangling from a branch. There was nothing between him and the ground but clean Canadian air. He felt the rumbling in his head and forced himself to look down. The cop seemed even closer now. He looked up at Lister grinning. A cloud of dust and small rocks rose up in between them and started tumbling up the mountainside towards Lister. The branch was hanging from bent enormously. Then Lister was holding on to nothing at all. He was travelling in the cloud of choking dust. Rocks and pedals were bouncing off him of him like he was being pelled by the angry crowd. He was flying up the mountain, panic yabbering at his brain. He clawed desperately at the rock face, instinctively grabbing for some kind of handhold. His fingernails scraped at dust and dirt. His legs kicked wildly, and at the yodeling rock like a child in the throes of a tantrum. The choking dirt cloud whirled around him, and he was nothing than the blind eye of a dust devil spinning up in the mountain, and time was suddenly passing. It just didn't feel like it to Lister. Then miraculously, a medium-sized rock tumbled into his hand and managed somehow to jam it into the mountainside, arresting his sudden ascent. He jabbed his foot into the cleft in the rock, and suddenly it was over. His heart was thumping normally, his breathing was close to normal, and thundering pulse had gone through his ears. He looked down. The cop was much further away now. Without feeling the need to catch his breath, Lister set off again down the mountain. The cat was leaning over the side, peering down at the bizarre spectacle. He was having a second thought about following Lister down the mountain, that was for sure. He glanced up the mountain rock, but Kryten was almost out of sight. But now, jogging backwards at what looked like an impossible pace, the cat prided himself on being very fleet-footed, but he couldn't have caught up with a yellow-coated robot even at the maximum pace. He stood up and stretched, and then stiffened. He had a strange feeling in his stomach. It wasn't a pain, exactly, more like creasy sort of void. He looked over the track and decided he had better head behind the bushes. Maybe a quick toilet stop would help him feel more like mountaineering. He just got comfortable when something unspeakable happened. There was a strange rustling in the ground. It was crunching over. His eyes widened to a maximum as some slimy, warm thing began to force his buttocks slowly apart. Lister heard his scream. Halfway down the mountain, he looked up and then down at the cop. He seemed obviously. The cop was almost at the bottom now, just grumbling down a few yards of loose rock at the foot of the mountain. When he hit the ground, he stopped, looked up at Lister, and then ran backwards to the police car. He picked up the radio that was dangling from the door and shouted into it. Then he climbed into the car, started up the siren, and streaked off along the narrow dirt track. Lister kept on down the mountain until the police car had reversed up the valley track and swept out of sight. He looked. The cat was peeking over the ridge at the top. Lister signalled for him to come down, and the cat turned around and started lowering his left body down the mountainside with astonishing numbness. Lister sighed. So far, he had got it right fairly soon. He had found out the answer to a lot of questions that had been plaguing them for so long. The most important of those questions was whether or or not did actually committed a crime. They had put him in prison for at least 8 years, for the last 8 years. Kryten felt more than a little stupid juggling backwards up in the mountain trial. He could probably have made better time juggling forwards, but he would have felt self-conscious flouting the conventions of the world, and was unwilling to risk drawing attention to himself unnecessarily. Not that a mechanical man thundering along the track at 42 miles an hour in a bright yellow plastic anorak could be squeezed into the category of commonplace sights. But Kryten was determined not to miss his rendition with Lister sun setting a more discreet speed or adopting a route which afforded more cover was out of the question. When Emma, Kryten thought, do as the snowman, despite forced haste, Kryten found he was sufficiently relaxed to enjoy something of a spectacular scenery. This was the first time he had ever actually visited Earth. Even the most suffocated multimedia travel guide was hopelessly inadequate at conferring the impression of truly being there. The colours for snow was so much more sumptuous and intense. The early morning sun was beginning to grow a reddy orange as he sank low in the east, and Kryten was astonished to see the moon was still clearly visible in the cloudless sky. He had always considered that possessing a mere single moon somehow made Earth a pure relation of the solar system, but seeing firsthand convinced him otherwise. Okay, let's stop. Okay, guys, so let's stop at 34, page 44. Well, okay, guys, I hope your complete Smeg heads enjoy this video about reading Red Dwarf Backwards when Red Dwarf crew travelled in the mountainside in the backwards reality. I hope you seem quite interesting. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for listening to me. Please feel free to write comments down below and give thumbs up if you enjoyed that video. So I'd like to also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, hit this notification. Don't miss out a future video. Okay, so I'm going to continue Red Dwarf Backwards on in the third part. I hope you enjoyed this video. So smoke me Kipper. I'll be back for breakfast. I'll see you soon, and please stay tuned.